secondary cancer. Our guest today is Sarah Clark. So welcome, Sarah. And I wonder
Hi.
if first just talk to us a bit about your experience of living with cancer.
Okay, so 5.5 years ago, at the age of 37, I was diagnosed with stage 3 non-small cell lung cancer, completely out of the blue, massive shock. I'd run a half marathon 2 months previously. It was just wowzers. And I was told it was terminal on diagnosis. And then I had a few rounds of immunotherapy, which didn't work. It spread to the heart, and then I had 2 pericardial infusions to drain the heart, and then heart surgery. It was just a bit rubbish, and then went straight into chemotherapy. And I managed 3 rounds, and I just couldn't do any more. It wasn't a choice. It's just something I couldn't do. And then into radiotherapy. So that was a bit of a rubbish year. And then I sort of had 6 months of feeling okay, and then it spread to my brain, and I had 2 brain tumours 6 weeks apart, and other complications, which meant I ended up having 4 lots of surgery, and I got an infection. And then I was sort of discharged with sort of St Luke's care, a sort of palliative care, and given 4 to 6 weeks to live. So that's kind of my journey. But that was exactly, my last treatment was exactly 4 years ago. And I've had no treatment since. I've had a lot of, my head's been a bit messed up in terms of psychologically, in terms of what am I doing with my life, my purpose, and all that kind of stuff. But exactly 2 weeks ago, I spoke to my oncologist, and he finally said the words that I am very unique, and I'm in remission. So I'm here today to sort of talk about how I went through my cancer journey, and hopefully to give a bit of hope that the experts can sometimes get it wrong as well.
Okay, thank you for that. We have 3 questions that we'd like to ask you. I'll start by asking the first one now, if that's okay with you. Many of our mums with a secondary diagnosis talk about how difficult it is to balance their own health needs and their treatment with a desire to care for their young family and the guilt that they subsequently feel. Could you talk a bit about how you've coped with this?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant question, and it took a lot of time to really think about how it worked for me. And I think a lot of my answers is going to be in hindsight, so things that I wish that I had done and things that I think would be useful. So one of my main issues was, in hindsight, self-care is so important. If you want to look after your children and have that quality time with your family, it's so important that you look after yourself first. And I know that the guilt comes into play, and it can be really, really hard. But the more you look after yourself, the more you can look after others and have that quality time. So it's really important to kind of give yourself a break. And yes, those thoughts of guilt will come into your head. It happened all the time with me, but it's about just giving yourself a break, and trying to be really clear about what keeps you well. So a second point that I want to highlight is about sort of planning your time. And also this links in with what keeps you well, like being quite focused about what are the things that keep you well, what are the things that don't help, what can you do to make sure that the time you have, especially during treatment, there's kind of sort of 2 sides to the question. There's while you're undergoing treatment, and then there's when you're feeling well, to make sure that you get the most out of the time that you have together. And I know when I was going through chemotherapy, I had a really bad time, and there's no way I could plan my time and try and do stuff. It was just, I just had to sleep. And it was really, really difficult, not spending time with my kids and trying to support my husband, and everyone was asking me questions, and it was really hard. So over my different rounds of chemotherapy, when I was feeling well, I decided to really sort of sit down and say, right, when am I well in my cycles? What's the best time for me to spend with my husband and my young children? And that was really, really helpful. And it was obviously, I had to communicate that with my family as well. So if you think about when you're most well in your treatment cycle, what you can do to support yourself to get the most out of that time, that you have together. And I think this links in really well with a third point I'd like to make, which is about what are your resources? Who are the people in your life that you can lean on? And you'll all have them. There's certain people who mean well, fantastic, they want to help, but they're not the best people for you. And then you have other people who are just fantastic, who you can tell them anything, they can just be there for you 100%. And it's about, right, who are those people that you have that connection with? Who are those people, friends, relatives, who can be the ones to take that load off you? And people want things to do. That's what I noticed. Lots of people wanted to help. So that's great. They can be the ones that can help support the kids. They can be go and do some research about your cancer and your diet and your eating and do all that kind of stuff. They can go to the library and get books out for your kids if that's sort of what you want to do. So it's about using those people. So when you are feeling unwell, they can be there as your rock to support you. So that's what I sort of found really useful. Sort of use those people in a positive way. So when you needed that time with your kids, you weren't having to do all of those things. You could have that time with your family. And I just wanted to mention here that I really grieved the things that I couldn't do. Grief played a big part in sort of that guilt and how I felt. Because I couldn't do the things I wanted to do with the kids. And it was about sometimes sort of accepting this is what I can do when I'm unwell, and this is what I can do when I'm feeling well, and this is what maybe I can't do for a while, and just accepting that and working on the positives. So looking at, rather than focusing on what you can't do, and it's not fair, I can't support my husband, I can't do this, I can't do this with the kids. It's like, okay, what can I do with the kids? And on my worst days, if it's just coming downstairs, sitting on the sofa and watching telly with them, or my main thing was I wanted to read them a bedtime story. So I might be in bed all day, I might be throwing up, I might be in a right state, but I would try and read them a bedtime story and give them a kiss goodbye. And that made me feel like I'd done something with them. So it's about focusing on what you can do rather than what you can't. And also as a family, we went incredibly insular. And we sort of shrunk, and it was really important for me that it was just me, my husband and my two kids, and that was like what made me feel safe. And then I had it was almost like a ripple effect. There was a model, actually, I've forgotten what it's called. So your family's really insular in the middle, then there's a circle around the outside, which is like my wider family, my parents, my siblings, and the ripple outside of that was other friends and family and work colleagues. And they all worked together to support us. And actually my mum, I'm just going to show you, my mum made cushions for it. So this is my cushion, and that was me and my family. And then this was art and textiles is her way of coping. And then these were the ripples around her. And she's done 4 cushions for the 4 seasons of the year. And me and my siblings have all got one. And I just think that was a really nice way of seeing how that worked and how that supported me. And something that, again, is really important for me in hindsight was having honest and open conversations with people when you're feeling well about how you're feeling, about how you want to manage your time, about why you want to maybe, for me, draw in as become a bit more insular. Because I know my mum and dad found it quite difficult, that they were being a bit claustrophobic sometimes with us and with the kids, and it was like, no, I just want to be with my children. And I think in hindsight that would have been really nice to have had those sort of conversations, and like sort of links in with like my own self-care and things like that. So I've just put at the end of my little notes here that are really, really important is not to feel guilty. You need to have treatment, you need to have this treatment, and it does feel absolutely rubbish. And I've started swearing a lot since I've had treatment. I'll try not to do it today, but it is awful. But it's just to say that it is temporary, and that you do have better days. So for me, it was about letting that go, that guilt, which again is easier said than done. Using your resources and sort of not feeling alone. So I hope that answered the question, or whether I've just rambled on. But
No, that was very helpful. Thank you very much.
Can I just pick up on one of the things you mentioned just around you talked about these concentric layers of support and different people, and you mentioned claustrophobia, and it's something that we talk about from time to time. Is that I suppose if you're part of that wider support circle, the onus and you can have the yearning to want to help, but you don't always necessarily know what to help. So you make this nominal offer of, if there's anything I can do, please just ask. And what we've discussed quite a few times in the past is that can actually create a dilemma for the person who's been diagnosed, that you have to feel obliged to take up that offer, but you don't know what the extent of that offer is. So if somebody's saying, if you need anything, then let me know. We think, well, does that mean you're offering to do the shopping? Are you picking the kids up? Are you offering to drive me to my treatment and stay there with me for the day? And I don't know whether, I mean, I have my ideas, the team have their ideas, but just from your experience, how, as a couple, rather than just yourself, how did the two of you respond to that when you felt like, oh God, I feel bad for, like, are we being ungrateful for not taking somebody up on the offer, but then we don't really know what to actually ask them because we don't know how much time they've got. And it's this debate that rotates, I think, and recycles over time of people's diagnosis.
I think we handled it really badly in hindsight, and that's why I've sort of highlighted the issue about having honest and open conversations and using your resources really well. So my dad's a social researcher. He's got access to the University of Sheffield, so he was on it. It was great. He had a purpose, and he went and found out all this research about lung cancer treatments, different. So he could go and digest all this papers and sort of come back with anything that I needed to do. And he was like, right, you need bone broth before your chemotherapy, you need this, that, and the other. So I didn't have to go and do that, and that was a really helpful sort of resource. And it was very specific. But I think with some people, it was just like the childcare. It was really hard to know when it's actually, I want to see my children. I don't want you to keep taking them away from me, because I thought they felt that they were being helpful. But my eldest has got autism, and he has sort of patterns of behaviour, which meant that he just wanted to spend all of his time with the grandparents and not with me and my husband. And my husband found that really difficult. And that's actually COVID really helped, because we couldn't see anyone, and we came back together. And it was really difficult because, so Joe, my son, would have these big meltdowns because he wanted to be staying over with grandparents all the time. And I'd be like, but I want to see you. And I think we should have had clearer boundaries. Because when I was unwell, we needed that help. We needed that support. I was so ill. Luckily, my husband could take carer's leave, but there's no way you could look after a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. It was really difficult. So in terms of, it's really hard to have like a clear answer, but I think in hindsight, it is about using your resources well. I had groups of friends who, so the positives, I had sort of like school friends, parent friends, and I had like one person out of each of them who would then go and disseminate that information. So I didn't have to talk to everyone. And, you know, I had some fantastic friends who I knew that I got on with. They were just perfect, and they would go and do stuff for me. So sort of learning, it might be about writing down, what do you want from your support network, and having a list. So lots of friends would just bring around food for me, because I went vegan for a while, but that has gone by the by. But you know, they just turn on the doorstep. There'll be like casseroles, there'll be food, there'll be Marks and Spencer's meal deals, and that was really helpful. So it's sort of maybe having a list about what you want from people and designating people. And I said it before about the library books. I had someone who went to the library and got out all the books about when parents are ill or bereavement, and that really helped, because I didn't have to go and do all that research. Other people went and did that for me. But it's knowing what you want, and it can be quite hard when you're going through those initial diagnosis stages.
I think it's interesting to hear you at the end say that you did end up coming up with a list, because it's certainly it's something that we share with people, to say you might find it helpful to actually come up with a list together, that if somebody does then ask that question, you've got something you can almost go, oh, actually this is the job that needs doing, or this is something. But just interested to hear your perspective on it. I'm just going to briefly share a disclaimer that I meant to share just on the screen at the beginning before I pause this recording, if that's okay. Put it up for